disparities that exist between the African American community and the larger American community today can be traced directly to inequalities passed on from an earlier generation that suffered under the brutal legacy of slavery and Jim Crow.
Barack Obama called that legacy America's original sin back in 2008. And just this week, Ta-Nehisi Coates won the prestigious George W. Polk Award for his Atlantic cover story, The Case for Reparations, a provocative call for our country to expiate that sin with a kind of penance. Dramatic government action to close the gap between whites and blacks. But in his new book, Shame, Shelby Steele says that kind of thinking perpetuates a deep problem. By focusing too much on how government can atone for our past sins, he argues, liberals have, quote, damaged the black family more profoundly than segregation ever did. And both men are here now to take on that debate. Ta-Nehisi, let me begin with you. You write that reparations is the price we must pay to see ourselves squarely. Why?
Well, because history matters. It's pretty clear to us that George Washington matters. We all get together and celebrate on July 4th, independence. We're all very proud of our legacy, our history. We all talk about America's great legacy as a democratizing force in the world. We talk about the greatest generation in World War II. We have a problem talking about history when it disadvantages us. And I think any sort of full consideration of patriotism in this country can't just talk about history when it favors us. We have to talk about it when it disfavors us.
And Shelby, you've argued in the past that the problem with reparations, it would be trading honor for dollars, selling our birthright for a pot of porridge. What did you mean by that?
Yes, you know, I think that there's a problem of dependency where we have sort of allowed that to happen in our community, to be more dependent, and that's hurt a great deal.
And how do you answer the argument that Mr. Steele makes in his book, Ta-Nehisi, that this government action has divided us more than ever before, done more harm than good for African Americans? Well,
I look forward to reading Mr. Steele's book. I haven't gotten a chance to get a copy yet. But I think I'm a little familiar with the argument. And what I would say, he's correct. Government action has divided us, but I don't think it's the government action Mr. Steele is talking about. I think the government action that has divided us is the taxes that were put on African-American labor during enslavement. I think it's the redlining period where we effectively erected a white middle class in this country and declined to do the same thing with black people and effectively left them out for unscrupulous lenders to take advantage of. I think it's the criminal justice policy in this country which sees African-American men construe some minuscule portion of the world's population and yet 8% of the enslaved population. We definitely have government policies that divide us. I don't think it's the ones that Mr. Steele is talking about.
What's the answer to that?
The answer to that, you know, one can be tempted into arrogance there, but the answer, I think, for the most part, is again this idea that this fact, really, that we have become more dependent as a result of the efforts on the part of white America to sort of do well by us, to do the good, to be helpful, and to make up for the shame of the past. That sort of thinking, I think, is what's caused us the difficult, held us back.
Government action is not the answer. How do you close this gap, this huge gap in wealth between whites and blacks?
You don't close it. You don't do anything. You leave it. You leave it alone. You practice as best as possible a discipline of freedom, where your struggle is not for some sort of advantage, but your struggle is for freedom itself. And that's what you, I think, do.
Leave it alone?
I'm sorry, that's just completely untenable to me. The gap that you're talking about, for every 5 cents in wealth that African Americans have, white families have $1 in wealth. There's a 20-to-1 gap. That gap didn't get there by magic. That gap is the result of housing policy that we had in this country, a long, long policy of taking wealth out of African-American communities and putting them elsewhere. And it has real consequences. I grew up in a neighborhood in West Baltimore where every day I went to school and at least a third of my brain was occupied with the safety of my body. That's a result of that community being rendered in a certain way for a long time in our history. And so just leaving it alone sort of casts young black boys and young black girls who are going to schools like I went to as a child and just says, hey, go out there and cope. That's untenable to me.
I went to those kind of schools too, worse. Worse. I was in the days of segregation, and again, there's this sort of compounding effect where I call it characterological racism, where we see racism as you do, I think, as immobile, immovable. And the result of that, again, is more dependency.
I see it as totally movable. I see it totally movable.
And the point is that it ain't gonna move. It is what it is, and it's not gonna change. It's not gonna go away. We need to get about the business of making our own lives as best we can. And
it's about as